So this ensures that if people call and complain, we can say, oh no, she went through the special event permit. She's told us that she's only taking so much of the sidewalk, yada, yada, yada. It just keeps people from being able to lodge complaints against you with us is all it is.
So the city requires a permit to speak on the sidewalk?
The city has a special event permit. So while you do have the protected right to gather, the city does have the right to ensure that it's all safe.
Well, you can't require a permit for something that's a right.
You can.
No, you can't. Do you know what a right is? Do you know what that means?
Yes, Gavin, I know what a right is.
Okay. So what's a right?
You have a right is the ability to go and do something.
Okay, so if you have the right, like, does the city, and I'm curious here, I mean, I understand the city has rules, but what I'm trying to figure out, because I live here too, is how can the city come in and say, you know, it's public property, we have a right, and I'm just listening, I was chatting with her, so I'm not here with this booth, but it does concern me that the city, I could see saying, would you get a permit? Like, we would like you to just let us know. So I guess the question is this a requirement, or are you just asking them to let you know?
It's in code as a requirement.
So you have a code that in Ephrata, Washington, that says that the law in Ephrata is that we have to get permission, someone has to get permission to exercise a right. Is that am I understanding that right?
Correct, yeah.
So do you understand Alexander Hamilton, 1778, in Federalist number 78, said that all legislation that violates the Constitution is void. So what you're actually talking about is legislation that's void. It's not law. It's lawlessness.
It's been upheld by the Supreme Court.
Yeah, but do you know who the Supreme Court answers to? They answer to the Constitution and to the people of the United States.
When the Supreme Court tells us this is illegal...
So the Supreme Court ruled on Ephrata?
Not on Ephrata, but there's other federal action that's been taking place.
But what I'm saying, what I'm saying is, we have to. I'm just encouraging you. You know, how they deal with you guys is up to them.
Sure.
I'm just encouraging us to have a conversation.
Why don't you let me have a conversation
on a conversation? Well, I just heard you saying. You just told me that the First Amendment comes secondary to Ephrata law.
No.
Well, you said you have to have a permit to exercise our First Amendment rights.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, just separate from your city administration, doesn't that concern you that somebody would be required to have a permit?
No, because the whole purpose of the permit, if you look at it, is just to make sure that everything is safe.
But okay, so
to protect citizens.
Can Ephrata deny that permit?
It can in certain instances if it's deemed unsafe.
How can you answer me this? How can you deny a right?
Because it's not safe.
No. A right is fundamental. You cannot take a right away. That's the meaning of a right. It's like, do you have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness?
Gavin, I'm the messenger.
I know, but remember, just keep in mind that there's never I'm just doing your job. You're always accountable. No, I don't know if you've sworn oath to the Constitution or not.
No.
Okay,
what I'm telling you is this is code.
Well, you need to be telling her that because I'm not with this booth, so she understands that.
Why don't you not interrupt me then?
Okay, well, I'll let you talk to her for a minute, and then I can answer my questions.
Okay. Very simple. All it is so that when people call and try and lodge a complaint, we can say, you know what, she did everything she was supposed to do. We checked it off, and everything's good. Here's the agreement. She's going to do this, that, and this,
I mean, okay, that's interesting.
Okay.
What happens if they don't get this permit?
Gavin?
No, I'm asking you a question.
Well, I'm still talking with her.
She's looking at this.
You would let me have a conversation with her.
Oh, did you want to keep talking, or do you want to look this over while I talk to him?
What if I don't want to talk to you, Gavin?
Well, you're a public official, so that you kind of have a degree of obligation to explain yourself. I think that's fair. I mean, I'm being really polite. I'm just trying to. It concerns me that this is just random that I'm here, and that you come up and you're saying that you guys have to have a permit to exercise your free speech. This isn't an event. This is a table handing out literature. That's free speech. So I just. What's your name, by the way? I've probably met you before, but
my name is Ray.
Ray, what's your position in the city?
Parks, Recreation, Public Relations.
Okay.
Tourism.
So, let me just say, I mean, I'm running for Congress. I'm very familiar with the Constitution.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And I just want you guys, and you should go back to the city and talk about this. I mean, I understand the city has codes and stuff, but you guys got to remember that you're accountable to the people. So if you say you have to have a permit to practice your First Amendment right to free speech, that's not true. It's lawlessness.
And this doesn't even apply to us because it says that if it has to be an actual organization that it goes with like things that are not political. This is for things that are not political.
So does this apply if because I've actually saw them here, I've thought about standing out here handing out literature too.
Okay.
So where do you draw this line then? I mean, if I'm standing out just talking to people and handing out paperwork, I don't even have a table maybe.
So
what is that?
What I would point you to, Gavin, is we have a code. You can get that online, and it
No, but-
explains when the city feels that you do and don't need a special event.
Okay, my question for you is, do you understand that it doesn't matter?
Doesn't matter what I
Hang on.
understand, Gavin.
No,
What-
it absolutely does. You have to understand this.
No.
When we're talking about a right, you have to understand that what the city feels
Ready to be
is
done?
irrelevant. A right is a right. So free speech, the right to be secure in your persons, papers,
Right.
and properties. So I'm trying to get you guys thinking from a constitutional perspective because you're accountable to that
So
too, just like
you-
I will be in
you
Congress.
You need to have this conversation as city council.
No, because you're the representative. So you're actually accountable to be representing the Constitution when you come out here.
I represent the city council, Gavin.
Do you know who you answer to? You actually represent the people, not the city council. That's who you work
so
for.
We live in a republic.
Do you know what a
Not
republic
a
is?
democracy.
Do you know what a republic is?
Correct. People elect representatives
Right.
to speak for
And do you know how the Constitution works? The Constitution is the supreme law of the land.
Correct.
So if you make a law, and I understand, the separation of government is great. We have the federal, we have the state, we have the city. Everybody has a different degree of authority so that the people have the control in a republic, and you're absolutely correct on that. But what's important that you guys remember is that the Constitution, especially when you're dealing with the matters of rights, fundamental rights, that you don't have the authority. That's an overarching authority. That says you don't get to infringe on these rights ever. That's the law. So all I'm saying is Afreda should be reminded that when you make a law, it's bound by the higher law, which is the law of the Constitution and we the people. And I would just encourage you guys to review this. I mean, what happens if somebody does this and they don't get a permit and they continually do that?
Continually, we would probably ask them to stop.
Okay, and what if they don't?
Then again, I would point you to the.
No. What do you do if they refuse to stop? This is not related to this booth in particular. I'm asking you a question in general.
We go to the code in which there's a series of penalties.
What are the penalties?
First and foremost, they're going to ask you to shut down. Second and foremost, it can go beyond.
We're not talking about asking. I'm talking about you're saying that to practice a First Amendment right and hand out flyers on a public sidewalk,
I'm
that
done with
we
the
have to have a
conversation.
permit.
Correct.
That
What
we
I'm
have to have a
telling
permit.
you is, if you have issues with this, you should come to a city council meeting and have that discussion with the council.
What I'm saying is,
I'm here to represent what the council has enacted as city code.
have you read the Constitution?
Nothing more and nothing less.
Have you read the Constitution? Do you understand that it's the supreme law of the land?
Thank you.
Okay, hey, thanks
Have
for
a great
chatting. What's your last name?
Towery.
Towerty. And so
Towerty.
you're the Parks and Recreation manager.
Yes.
Okay, just look, I didn't come out here to pick a fight. I was just here when you showed up, and I was like, wow, that's kind of different to hear that. But just, talk about this. Remember that you guys are bound to the law that we, the people, laid upon you. You don't serve, you work for the city, but you serve the people, and it's important that you remember that. So if the Constitution, if you're out representing the law, and remember, this goes through all of history. If you can never say it's just my job. You're either doing right or you're doing wrong. You're standing up for
Have a great
liberty.
day.
Or you're not, and
Good luck
just
in your
remember
candidacy.
that. I know, and
Goodbye.
just you guys chat about this, okay? Will you talk about this issue from a? Will you bring this up? Just mention that I talked to you about this, and ask the city.
It's
No,
reviewed regularly.
ask the city to consider this if it's constitutional. Do you feel that the law in the city is it constitutional? First Amendment.
Constitutional.
How?
This is constitutional.
How's it constitutional? Can you explain to me why? Because I don't understand.
On the right to gather or the right to speak, we simply ensure that it's in the city.
But essentially, if we have to ask you permission to speak, isn't that infringing on a right? Because a right is irrevocable.
We're not asking permission to speak.
If
We're
you could-
asking about the means in which.
No. But if you can deny it, it is permission, is it not? Isn't it permission if you can deny it? Don't I have to ask
No.
your permission? So you can.
It's not the matter of what is the message; it's how the message is conveyed.
Right,
That's
but
the
no,
best way.
free speech, you don't get to dictate that. Do you understand that?
So, okay, Gavin, I don't want to argue with you. What I'm
I know you
telling
don't, but
is
you chose this job, so you kind of put yourself in a position of having to account for the city's policy on it. You know what I mean?
What we're doing has been found completely legal, and it's been upheld by the Supreme Court.
No. The Constitution is what finds whether what you're doing
And-
is
and
completely
the Supreme
legal.
Court is what says
Do you know who the
it's
Supreme Court answers to? The Constitution. The Supreme Court, if they are outside the boundaries of the Constitution, let's use Obamacare as an example, that's lawlessness. The Supreme Court's ruling on Obamacare was illegal. they're actually in bad behavior. If you had a Congress that was lawful and following the Constitution,
to vote for different representation.
of course, and that's why I'm involved in running for Congress, is to get better
So
representation.
you have the ability as a resident of the city of Ephrata to bring it up to the council. To bring your points to the
But
council.
don't put it off on the council. Take personal accountability too, Ray. Okay?
Good luck. You're not going to let me finish a thought.
Okay, I will let you finish. Go ahead.
I'm going to let you. So have a great
Okay,
day.
you haven't really answered my question. I just want to point that out. Have a good one. Interesting. Very interesting. That was totally random. Just remember, I'm running for Congress. I'm not looking to get the mayor's seat here in town. But when we get into fundamental constitutional rights, absolutely critical that we remember that. All law that violates the Constitution is lawlessness. Ray is looking this from the perspective of, oh, I'm just doing my job. This is what they told me to do. Remember, if you're in enforcement, if you're working for a city, you're always accountable to liberty. You're always accountable to do what's right and to stand up for justice. And it's important to remember that. It's important to remember what it means to be free. You don't ask permission on public property to speak freely. That's lawlessness. Now, if this was private property, that's a different story. Obviously, with private property, people have rights. But it's very disturbing. I mean, here's this little small town of 7,000 people in my district, and I'm at the post office. There's a booth handing out information that's anti-Obama. And a code enforcement guy walks up and says, you need a permit to do this. Do you have a permit for that free speech? Do you have a permit for that free speech? And that's essentially what's being said. And there was a lot of kind of circular talking. Well, the city told me to do this. Well, the Supreme Court held this up. No, guys. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, including over the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court says it's okay to illegalize guns, that doesn't make it okay, because it's still a right. You can't revoke a right. The Constitution doesn't give us our right to free speech. The Constitution affirms our right to free speech. And it is, of course, the job of the Supreme Court to affirm that. They're not allowed to legislate from the bench. They're allowed to affirm and uphold that. And in a situation like free speech or the right to privacy or the right to bear arms, those kind of things aren't open to interpretation. Those are law. Those are absolute. Those are fundamental. And it's important that we do that. Anyways, interesting conversation. I'm glad that guy didn't freak out, and I know he thought I was just being annoying and causing trouble, but he comes up and I'm sitting here and he's saying, hey, you need to have a permit for this free speech. Is it ironic that I just happen to be around when these things happen, or do we have a real serious problem and it's time to do some self-governing and it's time to elect representatives who will represent us? Read your Constitution, guys. Teach your local governments. If they're not following the law, if they're not following liberty, if they're not allowing rights to be fundamental, you need to think about replacing your mayors, your city councils, your sheriffs. I mean, whatever level of government you're dealing with. That's important. Liberty matters. All right, take care. Have a good one. See you guys soon. CallMeGav.com.